It is Midweek Extra. Neil Atkinson with Pete Bolster, Keifer, MacDonald and Andy Bell all settling down on this Thursday for a quite relaxed conversation, which is one of the things I'm going to want to get into over the course of the show. And this relaxed conversation is brought to you by NordVPN. If you go to nordvpn.com/TAW, you'll get a great deal exclusive to you. It's obviously internet security, it's peace of mind, but it's also the ability to change your virtual location with just a click of a button, so you can access or have an awareness of work content on all other parts of the planet. It's up to you how you want to use that. You get a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. So nordvpn.com/TAW to find out more. And when you're through there as well, you'll be able to take advantage of offers that exist alongside being an Anfield Wrap listener or subscriber. I said it was going to be a slightly, relaxed show. It's a relaxed show because, Keifer, in a really funny way, the essence of cup football normally is if you are successful, the reward is you play another game. This is a week where Liverpool's reward is not playing another game. So whilst we may well have been scratching around for something to do on Tuesday or Wednesday because we're so conditioned to Liverpool playing every 3 days, because that's the way it's been for so much of this season, it was striking to me to watch really tough games involving our 4 possible opponents and just thinking to myself, thank God we're not involved in this.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, Liverpool get there on merit because of what they did in the league phase. I think the first thing I'd say is that I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it feels like the playoff rounds are just a complete and utter waste of time. I'm not really a huge fan of them, I think.
Why is that? Because we are in a situation here where Juventus finished ahead of Galatasarray, and Galatasarray have beaten them 5-2. So that's quite a decisive difference, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's like the fact that it feels like we've got quite a lot of similar ties, that we've kind of just gone round the houses again. I mean, I think of the Real Madrid-Benfica game 20 days ago. The Benfica goalkeeper scored like in the 98th minute, whatever it was, to kind of get them through. And their reward is to play Real Madrid twice, and they're probably going to lose over the 2 legs. So it's like, I'm not sure. Obviously, the kind of the Newcastle Karabag one was just completely one-sided. I don't think any of those teams wants to play again next week. It just feels pretty pointless. I think at a time when player welfare is a hot topic of conversation, it just feels pretty needless. And don't get me wrong, the Galatasarray Juventus game I thought was really good, as you say.
Bodo Glimt.
Yeah, it offers them that path through, but it just feels like a bit of another money spinner, which obviously is a conversation for another day. But in terms of Liverpool and their opponents, I was kind of looking at that, and I thought Galatasaray obviously gave us a game at the start of the season. I knew it would be tough for Juventus to go there. I think when people think of Turkish football and certainly the Turkish league, you maybe think of players who have maybe passed their prime a bit and maybe one final kind of European-based paycheck. But that Galatasaray side of the head, they gave us a real game. They've got one of the best forwards, in Europe in Osimhen. They've got Leroy Sané, who's no mug either. They've got a decent midfield. So I knew it would be a tough game. Obviously, the atmosphere there is really intense as well. And then the other game, obviously Bruges, Atletico Madrid, was just a bit of a mad one. Bruges, obviously, was it 2-0 down? Was it?
Yeah.
And then obviously they come back, and then they go behind late again, and then obviously set that one nicely up to go back to the Wanderer in next week. But I was quite surprised with that because I watched actually Atletico Madrid against Barcelona in the Copa del Rey semi-finals last week, and they were absolutely unbelievable. And it was like the complete opposite of what you'd expect from a Diego Simeone side. Like they were good, they were quick out of the blocks. They're looking to hurt Barcelona. I thought the wide players on that day was Lookman and Simeone's lad. Actually, they were absolutely unbelievable. Alvarez was good as well. It was just completely so one-sided. It probably could have been 5, 6 or 7. So for them to kind of throw away that lead yesterday, I was a bit surprised at that. Obviously, going back to the one, you'd expect them to kind of finish the job there. But if it is going to be Atletico or Galatasaray, I think I'd probably much rather prefer Galatasaray. I think obviously Liverpool been there this season as well, which does help with that kind of atmosphere, being the intimidation element. And just as I say, because of what I kind of saw from Atletico, look, I don't watch a lot of La Liga or Spanish football anymore, but what I saw from them kind of in that game, the Copa del Rey was unbelievable. So, if I was to look at it now, I think Galatasaray would be a nice one, but for kind of all the reasons I just said.
It's funny with Atletico, you do ultimately fancy them, but there is also a little bit of a reason why these sides have ended up in this playoff, which is just at this level, they've lacked a teeny bit of consistency. I think Inter Milan's a really good example of it. No one thing to go into Bodo Glimt is easy by any stretch of the imagination. But they are now under a fair bit of pressure from the first minute back at the San Siro. As I say, I think you can ultimately fancy Atletico before we get into Juve and Galatasaray. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got to be able to, the sides have shown first the ability to hang in, but they've also shown the ability that they can be punished by virtue of finishing where they're finished.
Yeah, and you mentioned Atletico Madrid there. Obviously, there's a reason they're in the playoff, and that's because they're not quite consistent enough to get the top 8. But there's a reason Brugge are in the playoffs as well, from a different perspective, because 4 or 5 years ago, they're pot 4 fodder if they're even in the Champions League. But they've got a little bit of consistency now. I've watched them a couple of times. They're very, very good at home. Won a big derby in the weekend, which obviously brought them a little bit of momentum coming into this game. And I think it's the second year in a row they've qualified for the playoffs, possibly. I know they lost to City in the last match day last year. I'm not sure if that dropped them to 25th or they snuck in, but they're not the 1, 2, 3 point teams over 8 games that we've seen, maybe like Ajax and a couple of others in the Champions League this season. So they'll give Atletico a game. Obviously, expect Atletico Madrid to get the job done ultimately. And Bodo Glimt's just a mad one, isn't it? It's an incredible story. It's a tiny little town. Is it the first team outside of the Arctic Circle to have reached the semis of European competition?
Inside the Arctic Circle.
Inside the Arctic Circle, yeah. There's outside. Yeah, you can argue actually that outside the Arctic Circle has dominated European competition over the years. Sorry, inside the Arctic Circle. But they've basically made 2 consecutive European runs out of getting a lead up in the first leg at home. Last season they got to the semis, knocked out by Spurs. They seem like the kind of Brentford, Midtjylland type team.
Before I bring Peter and Andy, you just said something really interesting to me there, which is that classically in European football, and it's literally the way the thing is now staggered. You've just said they've made it out of getting the lead up first leg at home. I think classically in European football, and especially back when the away goals rule was in, there was a general sense of it's far better to be at home second leg. You want to be at home second leg, be at home second leg. I think there's a few of these sides, and I think Galatasaray fall into it as well, where actually I think they want to be at home first leg. They want to see what they can do to you, what they can rack up, when it isn't the idea of chasing their own tail. And I think Bodo Glimt are a great example of it. Bodo Glimt will be made up every single time, I think, their first leg at home.
Well, it was disastrous 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I can't remember exactly when it came in, if you conceded a goal at home in the first leg, because people always said it counted as double. It didn't quite, but you certainly didn't want to concede. Whereas, Galatasaray, for example, go 2-1 down at home to Juventus, and it's not that massive of a deal because there's still an hour and a half, 2 hours of football still to be played, and they throw caution to the wind and they go and get the goals, and they're able to put the foot in the gas once Juventus get the man sent off. So I think it makes first legs generally less interesting from the neutral point of view of who's going to get through, but I think it makes the actual spectacle of the first leg more interesting because it's less cagey. And Bodo Glimt just seem to be that team who have the analytics behind them, the Midtjylland, the Brentford. You'd like to think other teams have caught up, but they haven't quite, because how is this team inside the Arctic Circle, 60,000 population? How have they managed to get themselves into potentially a round of 16 European competition? It's an incredible story. Obviously, loads of caveats sort of to having to go there. The weather, the plastic pitch, all of those are a massive advantage for them, but it's an advantage you still need to take. And they have a lad banging in goals left, right and centre. They're getting scalps in Europe left, right and centre, and fair play to them.
So Galatasaray are, it's fair to say, probably right now Liverpool's likelier opponent of the two between them and Juventus. And then, as I say, it will be one of Atletico or Bruges, and the way in which that final bit of draw goes will determine a lot. Pete, I do agree with Keifer that if it came to a straight shootout, who would you rather have, Atletico or Gala? I think we'd all probably go for Galatasaray, don't get me wrong. But the idea to go in there first leg, seeing what they've just done there to Juventus, and as Andy says, they can just throw caution to the wind. Everyone will see it as a massive free hit for them, including their own fans. And they've just shown, they've scored goals, they've already beaten Liverpool this season. They are not mugs.
No, they're definitely not mugs. I just want to go back to the beginning part when you said it's been a relaxing week, because there was a moment in the week when I was just looking for us to be on the telly or for something to watch, and I was like, this is a bit weird, this, because I'd been away for the weekend, so I forgot what the fixtures were. So I think if you take out the commercialism and the capitalism of football and who's running it, at the end of the day, it's a punishment this week. I think that's what it's there for, isn't it? And the reward was that we don't have to be involved in that, because, like you said, Keifer, before, it was completely mad. All the results, you're just looking at it pretty much, other than the obvious one where Newcastle just steamrolled, looks like they're through, doesn't it? Well, they are through.
But who would they rather play? For me, I'm not really sure Galatasaray are completely through yet. They've got a 3-goal lead. But
Yep, I agree.
Turkish teams don't travel well, so you just really don't know with that. They are very direct, and I wouldn't really want to go there. We've been beaten once already this season by them 1-0. For me, in isolation, when I think back, and at the time, Liverpool was struggling, but I didn't get caught up in the actual getting beat that night, because it would remind me of getting beat by Napoli a couple of times over the last few years.
Red Star Belgrade.
Yeah, Red Star Belgrade or various places like that. And I was just like, well, it's just one of them. You've had a go, and it's not that big of a deal. If you then played them in a two-legged affair, it would be completely different. And I think Liverpool would be completely fine against Galatasaray. I'd be pretty confident, as you can be. The problem is with Liverpool is you need a little bit of luck now going into this competition, because you've only got a squad of 14 probably, where then you need that 14 lads to be fit and ready and available. We'll speak later about certain players being available this weekend. They're the lads that I'm talking about, the likes of Joe Gomez and stuff, coming off the bench and shoring things up. So would I like to go to Galatasaray away with their crowd behind them and then go a goal down, and we haven't actually got a lad off the bench and we've just got 11 players who are tired on 60? It's a completely different event. So like I said, we do need a bit of luck, but Liverpool, the starting 11, I've got no problem with any of the teams that we would face. And you say Atletico as well, in the sense that like you would rather not play them. I think the name you wouldn't want to play, and the manager, and the fact that he's very low block, but they've conceded so many goals this season. I think they've conceded something like 18 in the Champions League, which is unheard of if you think of a Diego Simeone team. So they're definitely not the team that you should be fearing, and that's exactly why they've been punished this week.
They haven't been as Simeone as they were 10 years ago. There's no doubt about that. And Keifer, you mentioned that when you talk about, was it 4-0 they beat Barcelona in the Copa del Rey the other week? I would still look at it, and I do think Galatasaray will be quite comfortable at Juventus next week. I think they'll just have enough. I think they've done enough to take advantage of that, of the left back going off for Juventus in the first leg. Now, you may look at that game and see Juventus went down to 10 men and think, oh, right, okay, that's why they got the 5-2. They were actually like all over them at that time as well. The reason the left back gets sent off is because he's being tortured by Sané. And 5-2 flattered Juve, I thought, in the end.
So I would say this, we mentioned it on Review Extra, when he puts the board up for only 2 minutes, if I suppose a Galatasaray, I'd be furious.
Yeah, you can't do that.
It's 6 or 7 this, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
Given all the action they've been in the second half. It's unbelievable. And whilst they're down to 10 men, they have a good chance on 91 minutes. They've got another 2 chances, I think.
And then it really would have been dead and buried. I think it is anyway. But the point is, I think I would prefer, from a football point of view, to play Galatasaray or Juventus compared to Atletico. I think we have a better chance of winning that game. But it is worth noting that the Atletico side of the draw is the easier side of the draw. So there's Real Madrid and PSG in that top half, isn't there? So when you get to the quarterfinals, you expect to be playing a big hitter anyway. I think it's Chelsea, Barcelona, possibly Newcastle, possibly Newcastle if we're in that Atletico side of the draw. So you'd prefer that. I'd certainly prefer that to a quarterfinal against PSG. So maybe that ties into it. Maybe Atletico's slightly the harder round of 16 draw, but if we get through that, you're probably avoiding PSG.
I think
avoiding PSG.
I think all that's fair, Keifer. I think you begin to think about that with the draw, but it is also reasonable to say you're going to get a good team. You should get a good team in the last stage of the Champions League. You should definitely get one in the last 4. That's the way in which it's meant to work, and it will ratchet up really quickly, won't it, the size of the challenge for Liverpool?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Atletico Madrid, for kind of everything that we've just said, I think the baggage and the experience of playing Atletico Madrid isn't a nice one, especially going to their place. I think, you can talk about the team on the pitch and stuff like that, and maybe they've moved away from that style they were, if you think of peak Simeone, but just in terms of how they'll make your life hell over those 2 legs, as I say, especially at home, is just going to be, it's just something that you don't want to entertain, I feel. I think of, City going there, I think the year they won it, I always think of, I think it was Savic ends up pulling Grealish's hair. Right, yeah. It was just a bit of a mad game. I think of even, 1921, we went there the first leg, it was just domination. We just couldn't break them down. And you think of where that Liverpool team was, 15, 16, 17 points clear off of the Premier League, and it was just an absolute kind of dogfight. But as I say, either from now, I think as soon as you do go into this last 16 stage, there's no, it's so cliche, but there is no easy games. So I think it'll be a case of if Liverpool can get themselves right and, they can get to a level where they are playing how they played last season, they won't fear anyone. But I think it's more looking with him for Liverpool.
Someone can pull my hair if they want to, if Liverpool win the Champions League. Dom Szoboszlai, whoever, I don't really care about that.
They can't do mine. I've no margin for error there. Just stay quick, so I know I've talked really quick quite a lot on this so far. I think the extra round it does add in an extra layer of seeding, so it feels less likely to me, and I haven't sat down and worked it out, it feels less likely to me that we get a lovely quarter-final like a Benfica in 21-22, or is it a Villarreal that same season?
Well, the year we win it, we get Porto. We have Bayern Munich in the last 60, but we get Porto in the last
60. And I think that extra round of playoff, it's another game that those teams have to win as underdogs before they have to win another one as underdogs, and it's not impossible. It just feels less likely, and it feels more likely that there are big hitters in the quarterfinals, and ultimately that's what UEFA want, isn't it?
All right, I want to move on and talk about the Reds. I want to ask you something. It was interesting to me. I didn't talk much post-match of Sunderland. I was away for a couple of days. I did the immediate stuff and then went from there, Pete. But we get to see Liverpool play what you can sort of reasonably describe as 4-2-1-3. That Wirtz is emphatically one on his own. And I mean that almost entirely as a compliment. And then there's 3 forwards ahead, 2 midfielders behind, and it goes from there. Are you the three of you? I'll go to Pete first. Are we all agreed that we think, not that Liverpool will always play the same way every week, but that this is the likely plan involving Florian Wirtz for, let's say, more than 50% of the Premier League games from this point moving onwards?
You'd imagine so. I think you can't spend that amount of money on a footballer and then shoehorn him in a front three, and whether it works or not anyway, I think you want to play him in his best position. I think it's been very clear over the last couple of months that he has to play centrally. Putting him on the left and him drifting inside takes something away from the team and takes something away from him, more importantly. So I think in the direction of travel definitely has to be Florian Wirtz as that number 10. I think Arne Slot of Feyenoord, he had a number 10 and he had 2 midfielders that were slightly different at the time. That sort of then mitigated all the transitional problems that Feyenoord had at that point. And I think that's the biggest problem with Liverpool now, is probably because we've only done partly of the rebuild of the midfield and we haven't completely covered all the areas. But I think now moving forward in this final 11-12 games of the league and hopefully the Champions League and the FA Cup, we're going to see what we think is where he's going to be playing his best position.
So I think we might see from time to time, maybe occasionally, Keifer see him perhaps off a flank, more likely the left than the right. We might occasionally see what you can call 4-2-4-0, where it may well be that there's 2 10s, 2 wide men and no obvious number 9 from time to time. You might see that away from home in Europe. But again, do you think it's likely that the majority, as I say, I'm not going to say the vast majority, but that the majority of Liverpool's games, we are seeing what I've just sort of described there with the 4-2, 3 up top and Wirtz in behind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, kind of to echo what Pete says, you've got to get the best out of your main man, and it feels like that period where Salah went away to AFCON, there was a vacuum for someone to kind of step up and be counted for, and Wirtz, by all accounts over that time, it felt like he really did kick his game on a bit, and he has continued that. It feels like all those conversations that were being had externally in October, November time, where is he good enough for the Premier League? They just seem absolutely ludicrous now to look back on, and it's easy to have on a team where in 3-4 like Liverpool were at that stage of the season. It's easy to kind of pick problems and kind of pinpoint who's at fault, but he was never the problem for this Liverpool side, and if anything, I think even now we're starting to see him adapt. It's been pretty seamless, I would say. If you think of a young player going to a new country, think of the price tag as well. You think of everything around him seemed to be falling apart in that first stage of the season. There was no set midfield. Midfielders were getting pushed to right back. There was Salah wasn't performing. He had all these problems, but he was kind of expected to kind of rise above them and perform, which I thought was really unfair. But now, as I say, we're starting to really see the best of him and see that Wirtz that we saw at that Leverkusen, who was kind of the focal point of everything. And look, I think because of the kind of lack of depth that Liverpool have out wide, it's feasible to say that there might be games where you do need to play him on the left or the right. But I think the here and now, I always kind of throw the question, if you were starting a Champions League final tomorrow, what would your 11 be? Who will be playing where? Florian Wirtz, for me, he has to play in that position. You have to put him as close to the goal centrally as possible, because that's where he affects football games, and ultimately that's why Liverpool paid big bucks for him.
Are we a full house?
Yeah, totally. I think it obviously didn't work at the start of the season because McAllister physically wasn't there. Wirtz was physically wasn't there either, and the two of them playing in the middle, just we got overrun. But I think they both are. Well, certainly Wirtz is definitely there. I Sunderland is anything to go by, then McAllister's definitely there as well. And I think it's working again. So,
So if we say that then, when we get to this summer, in the following 2 summers, all 4 of the other midfielders who start games regularly for Liverpool are out of contract. So Jones is 27, and the 3 who were signed in the summer of 23 are 28. So that's Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai. They're all out of contract in 28. Andy, as part of that then, you know, you've got to presume there needs to be renewals or even sales this summer, because Liverpool are committed to Florian Wirtz. It sounds like the 3 of you are all committed to Florian Wirtz, and we all know that yours are the voices that matter in amongst this. And so that therefore does throw open the question of, firstly, what do Liverpool want from the 2? There's constant links to other midfielders coming into Liverpool, and there has been for 2 summers. It's worth saying Liverpool come very close last summer. Everyone does dwell on, Liverpool only bought Federico Chiesa. Well, they agreed a fee. They paid a release clause for Martin Zubimendi. You know, that suggests that they were happy to add an additional person in that area. So what, you know, if we imagine this scenario, then 1, what do we want for the 2? But 2, what do we think of the 4 currently, and what do we think the likelihood is, and how they lock in to playing as a 2 behind a 1?
Well, we did try and sign Zubimendi, but I think that was before we knew quite how good Gravenberch could be in the number 6 role in the Premier League, and he's been marvellous there. And it's a different role to what he played in the first half of the season, because in the first Arne Slot season, because Wirtz is very number 10, whereas McAllister and Szoboszlai were a little bit more 8, although Szoboszlai more advanced. So it is a different role that he's been playing, but he's been playing it very well once again. And you're right to mention that it does then become, sort of going into next season, assuming, well, if we don't sign a central midfielder, and I've no idea how likely we are, it will be picking 2 from 4, essentially, is what you're talking about. And right now, you look at, it certainly has to be Gravenberch and Szoboszlai, based on what we've seen this season. I don't think Curtis Jones has had a bad season by any stretch. In fact, I think he's been a little bit harshly treated, but we know the manager likes to keep things the same and likes the same 11 where he can do it. And it remains to be seen whether McAllister's poor form is poor form, or whether that is ultimately him as a player now, and the legs have fallen off in a Fabinho-esque way where nobody could have really predicted it. So I think if there is one to go, it will probably be between McAllister and Jones. I certainly hope it isn't both, because my take on this season, and it was actually backed up by McAllister's comments a couple of weeks ago, is that they've tried to just do a little bit too much at once. And I understand the wage bill's big and the bonuses are big, and you can't have a really sort of big squad in the way Arsenal do. That's just not how our structure works. But if it was between sort of keeping one of them around just for a season, and finding a way of keeping them happy while maybe another midfielder beds in, I would be more in favour of doing that than more upheaval, taking 4 or 5 out, bedding new players in, and ultimately we don't know whether they're going to come in and hit the ground running and we're starting from scratch again.
It's a valid question to ask what you want from the 2. If you're going to play Wirtz as the 1, to ask what you want from the 2 is different to when it was Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai. You know, Gravenberch was quite nailed on last season as a 6. To his left was a player who would be reasonable to sort of describe as a 6/8, and then Szoboszlai is an 8/10. If you are dealing with one player who emphatically does have that freedom and is the player through whom Liverpool are going to put the ball much of the time, then it does change, doesn't it, what you want from the 2 players who play deeper, and then that does become a fresh challenge for not just the manager but for the technical director as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. The first thing is, I'm not completely in agreement with a lot of people's opinion that McAllister's legs have fallen off. I think if you look at Liverpool's midfield last season, there was a clear runner there, and they were tighter together. And if you've got a guy like Dom Szoboszlai running around everywhere, he's your water carrier, isn't he? So what I'm looking at there is that when you talk about Zubimendi, the player that looked like he was going to come in, there was a striking difference between, you were talking about what do we want, what does Arne Slot want, because the season before it looked like we were going to get Caicedo. So there's a clear difference between Caicedo and Zubimendi. One is a sort of a destroyer, and the other one is a bit more of a controller, someone who's going to dictate play from deep. Who is that in the Liverpool midfield? It's Alexis McAllister. The problem is with Alexis McAllister is again, it goes back to what Andy said about Ryan Gravenberch. Is Ryan Gravenberch the number 6? Because I'm not entirely convinced, although he was fantastic last season when we won the league, is he the number 6 who's going to sit there and actually control and dictate play, or is he a bit of a runner? To me, he always looks like he's playing there because he's doing more for the team. He's more of an 8. He wants to get involved in the play. So for me, what I want and what I think what Arne Slot would want is someone, again, who's going to dictate that play, but and make sure that we're making those passes early into Florian Wirtz. I think the whole dynamic of the midfield's changed. And I think when we've signed Florian Wirtz, although he wasn't directly the problem in the sense that there's a problem with how he plays football, I think he was the problem for the rest of the midfield. And I think that's why it's taken a few months now for Liverpool to combat that frailty inside that midfield, really, because I think that's why players are struggling.
Yeah, I think as much as Wirtz, I think Wirtz definitely does work hard, and he's putting in the press, he's putting in the sprints now. He's not Szoboszlai at that position, and he can never be. And as much as you would like that control, and certainly Arne would like that control in the midfield, there will ultimately be turnovers, and there will be times where they have to run the other way. And I think just naturally the opportunity cost of having two in the midfield, no matter who they are, they could be the best runners in the world, you're always going to be sort of covering a bit of space and exposed to a certain extent. So the question is, I suppose, is McAllister able to do that in those moments? Gravenberch is quite good at covering that space, and he might not go and win the ball, but he might hold the player up enough for players to get back and get us back into shape. I'm not sure McAllister can necessarily do that, and it's harsh on him, because I agree, last season we do play to his strengths, because you got Szoboszlai there doing the running. Whereas this season is very much, Wirtz is going to be here, he's going to be very number 10, and yes, he's going to put the work in, but you two will have to cover a lot of space, and I'm not sure that's McAllister's game anymore, but I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think there's a big decision this summer. I definitely think, if I was to pick one, if you were to narrow it down, it's obviously Jones or McAllister who's going to go. I think it's difficult. I mean, there's comments from McAllister's dad this week saying about, offers on the table and reviewing that and stuff. But I also think if I'm Curtis Jones, I'm kind of looking at it. Feels like every time the manager is asked about him in public, he kind of says, he's a great player, but he's kind of not first choice. And it feels like he said that, he's underlined it, he's put an exclamation mark at the end of it. So if I'm Jones, I'm thinking, I've been part of this team now for 5, 6, 7 years. He's kind of never kicked on in the fashion that I think we'd all expect him to. And I think it's a harsh criticism, isn't it? Because it's the...
No, I was about to say, it feels as though there's been two facets to that. One has been a little bit on managerial decisions. The other one, though, has been a funny little thing with injury, where he does 3 or 4, looks great. I mean, I still remember this season, we were getting beat at the time, but he was running the show at Brentford. And he'd been excellent in the 2 or 3 games that preceded, and then suddenly he's off after 25 minutes. And this is where I both feel sorry for Jones, but maybe this is Jones's physical reality as well, and that you can't build around that. Even as much as critical as I've been of McAllister's fitness this season, if you look at last season, up until when he does stop playing at the end of April, my God, he's available for selection. And I think that is, if you want stability in the middle of the park, and the league leaders, however flawed they are at the minute, are very consistent on Zubimendi and Rice in there. If you want stability in the middle of the park, then that matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And just to take it back to the McAllister point, I think, we all say he's maybe not as fit, but if anything, it's kind of like the opposite. He's actually so fit. He's played so many games. You probably take it back to the World Cup.
Yeah, Brighton. When he was at Brighton in the World Cup,
he plays so many games, and it just hasn't ever stopped really. And that was similar to Fabinho in that sense. It's not that these players aren't fit. It's just that they're never really injured. Can you think of a time when McAllister has picked up an injury? Not really. That they're so reliable. They're so important to the managers. They are the cornerstones of midfield or teams that they do play Tuesday, Saturday. I think that the Jones one, it's funny you say about that Brentford. I mean, there was Brentford 23-24, I think just for the League Cup final. I think he goes off as well with the injury that day. And as you say, it kind of just feels like every time he gets close or he gets a bit of a run. I mean, he had a good run, I thought, over Christmas, was really good at Inter Milan. But it just feels like when everyone is fit and available, when the manager has all of his options, he's never at the forefront. He's never the main guy. And the impression that I get is that we're maybe at a bit of a crossroads where if he does want to become that main guy or become a player who's going to start 30 out of 38 Premier League games, does he do that at Liverpool? And that's a really hard decision for him to make. But I think it's one where I think this season everyone has been moved around. Szoboszlai's gone to fullback. The midfield's probably not as strong. He's probably a man short, for being completely honest. And he still is. He's only made 9 or 10 Premier League starts. So if you think Liverpool are probably going to sign someone next summer, the competition for places is going to be even more intense. It's like it doesn't spell well. You also think from a Liverpool point of view, I hate mentioning it, but like the PSR element, if you were to sell one of them, well, Jones is going to go down as full profit.
But the homegrown element, if you want to have a full squad, you need to have homegrown.
But I think the homegrown element of it, I think Liverpool can be clever with how they fill that. There's different ways. I also think it's that's a problem anyway, isn't it? They're short on homegrown players at this moment in time, so it's an area that they're already probably have an eye on or addressing at least. But then I also, get the impression that maybe McAllister might want something new as well, and that I've thought that maybe for a couple of months now. You talk about the departures in the squad. It sounds so simple, but someone like Luis Diaz, a fellow Spanish speaker, we know how kind of close those South Americans are, and I think the departure Nunez as well, someone he was really close to. I just wonder if it gets to that point where he's maybe done a couple of years in England. Does he want to go and do something else? Again, links quite frequently to Real Madrid. Could that be a way that Liverpool get a decent sum back? But I think definitely, I think one of those two will go. I think Szoboszlai's the one you've got to throw everything at. Again, talk of other clubs looking at him, Real Madrid. But I think if you were to look at anyone in the squad right now, and you're talking about someone who could succeed Virgil van Dijk as a captain, and I know it's only a short kind of span of time, because it feels like he has only come into those kind of captain conversations this season, because some people say he's not even going to start games, but it feels like he's the next Liverpool captain in this current team. So I think you've got to throw everything at him. But I think in terms of the other two, McAllister and Jones, it's a complete flip of a coin. What happens with them this summer?
With Jones as well, I think what people forget is, because we're looking at it from a fan's perspective, and we're looking at it as Liverpool is the absolute destination, but there is life after Liverpool as well. And I think we were talking about Curtis Jones leaving his boyhood football club as a starter, but he's not a starter. I think he's only started 10 games or maybe 11, because he started the weekend, didn't he? So he started like 11 games this season, so he's not giving up this starting place. He's 26 or 27, did you say, Neil?
25. What's dead interesting just on that though is they're all around the same age. McAllister's the one who's a little bit older, but the other three are all theoretically moving into their peak years. I think that's a really interesting part of this, which is that often you'd feel as though that was a real positive, but what you've got is if you're playing 4-2-1-3, and we all know who the one is going to be most of the time, and Liverpool have given him pays a huge amount of money for him and giving him loads of money, then you end up with four players who are all well within their rights to say, well, I should be starting, but there's only two spaces. But you need four minimum. Frankly, you can see that. So how you do your age profiles, I think, is really interesting.
If we stick on the age profile for a sense as well, if you're 21 coming into a team, you sort of accept hierarchy. But the older you get, and the more the fact that you become a man, you've got a child, you've got a wife at home. And
you think you're really good.
Yeah, you think you're really good, and you're like, well, no, I need to be the absolute business right now. There's the Inter Milan transfer rumour or whatever. Going to live in Italy, a life in Milan, look at Scott McTominay, what he did at Napoli and things like that. I think that would all be appealing. So what you've got to ask the question as well, Neil, is how many midfielders do we need? If you're assuming Florian Wirtz is the 10, and we know that Dom Szoboszlai can play up there as well, how many do we need for that position? Because you'd assume Ryan Gravenberch would be the one that stays. If you brought someone in to replace the homegrown element, that's 2. So then how many do you need to cover? Because I'm not really sure we need as many as we think we do as well. So for me personally, I've just got a feeling both of them go, both McAllister and Jones leaves in the summer.
So I think there does need to be an element of succession planning. We did get stung by this in 2021 where the midfield grew old together, and for many of them legs fell off together, and it went from the best midfield in the world in terms of getting around the pitch to, wow, they've so many games played here, they've so many miles on the clock that, we should have maybe done something a little bit earlier. Obviously the Henderson contract at the time was quite controversial.
You mean 22-23?
Sorry, yes, 21-22 were really good, of course. 22-23. So as much as these are coming into their peak years, and yes, for the next year or two, having those 4-5-2 spaces might be ideal. There does come a point where then, what's the next one coming through? What happens if 2 of these 4 players' legs fall off at the same time, and we're in a little bit of trouble? So you mentioned you think that possibly 2 will go. I would be very against that from the perspective of what I said earlier about not doing too much at once and not doing another summer of complete upheaval. But I think 1 in, 1 out, and that 1 out would probably be one of McAllister or Jones, would be the sweet spot there. Bring someone in at 22-23. Don't necessarily have to come in and start straight away. Don't have to be spending 80-90 million on them, but just freshen it up a little bit there, changing the age profile of that midfield. 1 in, 1 out, I think, is a sweet spot there.
If you want to win the Premier League next season, though, surely you can't bring in a young lad to play midfield at a number 6 in that double pivot position.
I'm not saying like a sort of 19-20-year-old who you really need to bed in. I'm not saying sign like Giovanni Leone in midfield, but somebody not necessarily at 27-28 who you have to spend 90 million on, but somebody you spend 50-60 on, decent up-and-coming midfielder. There will be plenty of them out there. And maybe you do one of McAllister or Jones out, just freshen it up, do your succession planning, but ultimately keep the core of that midfield together.
What if you're the manager and you're looking at it? So we're looking at it as fans, we love McAllister, we love Curtis Jones. What if you're looking at it and you're the manager and you're thinking, we can get rid of the two lads that don't fit into stylistically how I want to play? Because I actually think both of them and their legs problem and the fact that they just can't cover ground, not because of their ability, just because they can't cover ground, is the problem. And then if you're keeping one of them to stick around, if you bring in a lad, for example, like Adam Wharton, you brought him in and he's starting, they're just floating around on the bench anyway. So I'm not... we don't like to change too much too quick, which we've done, but I feel like Liverpool have put themselves in a position over the last few years where they've sort of have to do that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. We will play a lot of games as well, and you can say too, let's say keep Curtis Jones around, and you say, well, sometimes Wirtz will play on the left because we'll need to give Gakpo a rest or Ekitike a rest, and Wirtz will play in the middle. And you sort of sell it to Jones in that way. I do think you can't stick two of them around. Like, say you bring in Adam Wharton, and it's Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and Wharton, and you can't say to two of them, right, just float around there just in case. But I think you can do it with one. And I don't disagree with your point in terms of McAllister stylistically. I'm not too sure I agree with it in terms of Jones. He's not N'Golo Kante in terms of covering the ground, but I don't think he's as leggy as what we've seen from McAllister either. The other thing is, like I mentioned earlier, we saw from McAllister in that Sunderland game, he was everywhere. He looked like the Alexis McAllister of 4 or 5 years ago. So maybe, and I'm praying that this is a case, that it's not a case of a long-term change in his body, but actually, you know, he's just found a little bit of a second win for somewhere in his career. And if he's done that, and we can get the legs of a McAllister 4 or 5 years ago, then you absolutely keep him around as well.
I suppose the best way to counteract that is if you do bring in someone of a younger age profile, it stops you getting to that end point of McAllister where he has played too many games. You know, where he is playing, you know, the same amount that Fabinho played in that 21-22 season, where you are just asking him to go again and again.
But that needs the manager to be comfortable in changing. And I don't just want to put this on this manager. I'll go again. You look at Arsenal, and the one area where there's been the most consistency they've had all season this season has been Zubimendi and Rice. They've had injuries and suspensions at centre-back. He's not at all settled with whatever he's doing in his front three. He's had different number 10s, Arteta, but he's picked that midfield too. So I don't want this to become Arne Slot won't rotate. I think you've seen in the last couple of games with the way he's used the left-backs, when it's there to do it, he'll do it. We've seen it with left wing, when it's there to do it, and centre-forward last season, when it's there to do it, he will do it. We think, though, there's areas on the pitch, managers should be happy to rotate everywhere. And I think we almost accept it with centre-back, but I also feel as though through the centre of the pitch, I think managers do like to have consistency. So I take your point, I don't disagree, like in theory and paper, I'm with you. But if we look at what managers tend to do is they almost want, you know, the 21-22 team's a really good example in that Klopp was quite happy to rotate, but it was Alisson, Van Dijk. He did move the centre half would change, but then it was always Thiago and Fabinho. If he could pick them, he'd pick them. So I think that is a thing, isn't it, for the managers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Slot more so, especially I think where he's come from in terms of, you know, Feyenoord and the kind of the expectation, you know, you're not expected to go deep into Europe. So I always remember when he first came, it was a thing of like he worked with a really small squad. You also think about the personalities of the two managers, you know, Klopp and Slot. You know, Klopp would be able to entertain a 20-man squad just because of, you know, his infectious personality, making people feel 10 foot tall, making people, academy players, feel like they were, you know, the best players in the world when they had to come on against Chelsea in the League Cup final. He was so good at, you know, balancing that squad in such a harmonious way. I'm not saying Slot can't do that, but it's a completely different element of man management. I mean, you know, for the talk of, you know, the lack of options in rotation this season, you think of the players he had last season that he didn't use a great deal. I mean, Gerard Conser starts at Ipswich. We didn't really see him again after that 45 minutes. You know, Elliott, okay, he played here and there, but he didn't play a huge amount of football compared to what I think everyone expected him to play. You know, you've got Nunes as well. He again was more of a kind of a bit part option. So I think that this idea that, you know, Liverpool haven't had loads of options, I think it's almost not by design. I think they would have like one or two more. We know that, you know, even in January they wanted to bring in another defender. But I think Slot, we've seen that like he likes a really small core.
I agree, but I do think he does, and that's what he wants to do. But I think 21-22 is really instructive in that for 1 year. It's worth saying, you'd think how deep Liverpool's squad was 21-22 when we went through an injury issue in 2021 in the COVID season. We only buy one senior player in the summer. And yet, if you think about Klopp's midfield options in 21-22 are almost perfect. And what I mean by that is they're perfect in terms of profile, age. So you've got Fabinho and Thiago, who are going to play a lot of the time as a double pivot at the back. Fabinho maybe a little deeper. Then you're picking from Henderson and Keifer. Naby Keita's Liverpool career is obviously a mixed bag, but he was a good player. But Keita doesn't think at the start of the 21-22 season, I'm a regular starter. He doesn't have that in the back of his mind. I should be starting every game. Henderson, you've got as club captain, does expect to start, wants to start, but understands that it won't be constant. So you've got your two, then you've got that next two. Then you've got Oxlade-Chamberlain, who knows he's hugely injury prone, but he's a good age, is about right. Then you've got James Milner, who knows he's coming to the end of his career, will fill in bit parts here and there, get time at fullback, get time in midfield and come off the bench. Dead happy with his lot. And then you've got Harvey Elliott, who's a young player breaking through, who knows he's grateful for every opportunity. And then you've got Curtis Jones, who's the lad who's come up through the ranks. And my point here, Keifer, is it's such a sweet spot moment that, and the manager himself's been there for 6 years. So Harvey Elliott, Curtis Jones, he knows them like the back of his hand. James Milner's his best friend in football, theoretically. It's his club captain. He bought Naby Keita. There is this sort of, you can just end up with those moments where that stuff becomes easier. Because I remember in 16-17, there was a lot of Klopp doesn't use the right players at the right times and all this sort of stuff. And I think none of this is sort of me both praising Klopp to the skies or having a go in any direction. But I think you almost, you don't look into these situations, but you can find yourself in this moment where all the profiles seem right, the hierarchies seem right, the acceptance of what's working seems right, and then guess what, you're winning every week. So everyone's sort of got a cop for it as well, and that's what happens in 21-22. And I don't think we talk enough about the 21-22 squad. We end up front with 5 unbelievable forwards, and then Minamino, and then Origi. And all this fills the squad rules, if you know what I mean. Like, you got enough homegrown. But a lot of it is, well, that just took time to reach that point and hit that point.
But the other side of that conversation is 21-22 is great, but then 22-23 happens, and there's a trade-off there, isn't there?
Hugely.
So
because you can't expect Keita or Oxlade-Chamberlain to come in and fill the gaps that are about to be left by Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson, because they're not ready. They were at their maximum point in the hierarchy at that time, and they couldn't take the step.
And I think Henderson actually, and I was massively in favour of giving him that contract in 2022.
21, wasn't it?
So he gets the 5-year contract. The famous 5-year contract is at the end of the 21-22 season, isn't that right?
No, it's 21. It's 2021.
Is it?
Yeah.
So we get the year.
So we get the year, and then, but actually towards the end of that season, and when you look back in retrospect, the last 3-4 months of that season, Jordan Henderson isn't very good, and you do see sort of physically the miles on the clock take its toll on him. So I suppose as much as you talk about the profile of the midfield in 21-22 being perfect, and I don't disagree with that. In terms of the 3 years following that, are you better doing one of Keita, Milner, Henderson, Foray, McAllister at that time? And I don't know if McAllister was good enough to come in this at that time, but the McAllister, whoever that was at the time.
No, I think it's a fascinating football philosophical point, which is that if you get to the point where you pretty much nailed the squad, you're 6 months away from that possibly being a mile away. So that's why you're almost, you can make an argument. And it'd be, again, this is one of the reasons why it is a shame that technical directors don't talk more full stop, not just ours or other people's. You can actually make an argument that you'd always want to be 95%.
Yeah.
That if you hit 100%, the problem is
next season you're 70.
Yeah. And that can be just what happens.
Yeah.
So you almost want, you almost want to feel, and there'll be loads of people listening to this, Liverpool supporters will hate this sentence, but you'd almost want to consistently feel like you're one man short.
Yeah.
Or one type of player short, or one age range short, and then you're chasing that, but you accept that in the snaring of that one, you lose another one, and then you're one other thing short. That might be the best way if you want to have consistent success to run a squad, but no one wants to hear that.
Because you can't always do the surgery you want to do. I mean, the midfield rebuilds works out really well for us in the end because we got Gravenberch last minute and he turns out brilliant. But we did try and sign basically half the world population midfield before that.
Yeah.
So that didn't go exactly as we planned, but we have to do that surgery because we say, right, we're at 100% for this year. And it is hypocritical of us because in 21-22, nobody's looking at that midfield and thinking, oh, well, I wish we had Alexis McAllister instead of Jordan Henderson or instead of Naby Keita. It's perfect for us at the time, but it's also not our job. And it's not their job to make popular decisions. It's their job to succession plan and make sure that Liverpool are competing for 3 years in the bounce rather than just going hell for leather in this 1 year and then next year's a bit of a write-off as it was.
Interesting stuff, absolutely fascinating stuff. Listen, here is John Gibbons speaking to Jim Daly about his upcoming tour.
And it is John Gibbons, and I'm very happy to be joined over Zoom by Jim Daly from Match of the Daly podcast and Crystal Palace fan as well. Jim, welcome to the Anfield Wrap. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I mean, I'm delighted to be here the day after Palace have lost at home to Burnley, having been 2-0 up and then let in 3 goals in 7 minutes. I mean, what's a more Palace way? So, yeah, crazy season we're having. Some ups, some big ups, some terrible lows, but, that's being a Crystal Palace fan.
Yeah, I did smile when you got a late winner against Brighton at the weekend. I thought, oh, Jim will be happy when I see him. And then you were 2-0 up last night, and I obviously then turned over to our game, and then I couldn't believe it when the goals started coming through. But does that just feel like very life as a Crystal Palace fan?
Massively, and to be honest, that's basically the theme of my show as well. My show is basically for any football fan whose team has screwed them over, which is every football fan ever. There's a whole bit in the show it's about 10 minutes long about how Palace are the most ridiculous team in the world. And when I was doing the show last year, obviously we had our best ever year. We won the cup, we won the Community Shield against you guys, and I had to every time I did this bit, I had to caveat in the show and say, right, obviously before this year, Palace are obviously this year. I'm aware we're good now, but for the last 35 years, we're ridiculous. And then 2026 happened, and thank God, because now we are ridiculous again. And that bit is now about 40 minutes long in the show. So they're just constantly giving me so much material, whether it's Macclesfield or Burnley or Glasner having a meltdown, Exeter trying to leave. It's just been absolutely ongoing. So yeah, this team is something special. There's a reason there's so many comedians that support Crystal Palace, because I think you need a sense of humour and a sort of a dark approach to life to appreciate being a Palace fan. They've made us work for
it. But you'll always have that day in the sunshine in May in 2025. And it was really funny because I don't know if you'll have seen a couple of weeks ago when things were looking very ropey at Palace and there was players looking to leave. And I think a Nottingham Forest fan tweeted, do you think they think it was worth it all to win the FA Cup? And then every fan of every other football club went, yes, of course, you idiot. How could you even say that? Players go, players leave, managers go, but you wait your whole life for a day like that. So to think that any Palace fan would swap that day for anything, including limbs, it just felt so out of touch. And I was really pleased that everyone collectively, in a lovely way, rounded on him.
It's the FA Cup. You know what I mean? It's the one thing growing up, really, that you want your team to win. It's so romantic. And I saw grown men, including myself, bawling their eyes out at Wembley. And with respect, no one's crying their eyes out at John Philippe Mateta leaving the club. Yeah, he's been a great striker for us, but we're not on our knees crying our eyes out. I would, even the Macclesfield game, if you'd said to me last year that you're going to win the FA Cup against City, that you're going to have to lose to Macclesfield, it'll be the biggest cup upset in the history of the FA Cup. It'd be your worst result as a football club ever. I'd be like, yeah, take it. Snap my hand off. I don't care. I want to win the FA Cup. But those days will live forever. My dad's 78 and he'd never seen Palace win any. He'd been watching Palace since 1956.
Yeah.
Think about what football was like then. Probably wasn't even nets. You know what I mean? Probably was. But, he's seen so many iterations of Palace. And for him to get to watch Palace win the cup, I'm only 40, but it makes me feel so young. And who knows what the next 80 years of Palace will hold for me. So they could have burned down Selhurst Park, and they could have changed our name to Crystal Brighton Hove Albion, and I'd still take it for that one day in May. It was magic.
I know. It did feel like the whole country were Palace fans that day and just enjoyed it. And the look on everyone's faces. It was one of those times where, and you were in the ground, so you would have seen, but hey, I'm sure you've watched it back. They kept panning to the crowd, and you'd see, people young and old, male and female, whoever it was, just so emotional or so nervous and so everything. And then they go back to the football and you'd be like, no, just go back to them. We'll figure out what's going on the pitch by their faces. You don't worry about the lads. We've all seen men kick footballs. I want to see these people on the verge of something that they couldn't believe and willing every moment, because, every emotion was on those faces, and that's what football's all about.
That's exactly what football's like, and I think whether you support any team in the UK, you could probably relate to that moment. We probably all had games where we felt like that, and moments, maybe good or bad, where we felt that kind of emotion. So yeah, I had so many messages on Instagram from people going, "Thank you, you've saved football," and I was like, "Well, I did nothing. I did literally nothing." But I get it, and I felt the same. When Leicester won the title, when Wigan won the cup, back in when was it 2013. Like we remember these moments because they don't happen very often. And I think Palace are, I mean, Brighton fans will disagree. I think we're quite a likable club. We had very likable players. Eze, Gahey, we got some likable manager at the time. Obviously, fast forward now, slightly different. And I think, and it started with that tifo. The tifo beforehand of the two lads who lost their dad, celebrating Ambrose's goal, which I was there for. I've then got to meet. I actually stood next to one of them at the Community Shield a few months later. Nathan, superb guy, lovely bloke. I mean, they are Scousers who support Palace. It's absolutely crazy, and that's the beauty of football. It doesn't matter, how you become entwined in your club is unique to you, and they are huge Palace fans. And so that I think most Palace fans were on the verge of tears before kickoff because they saw that tifo. Everyone knew what it was about, and you can feel the feelings coming up. And then what happened on the pitch just took everyone over the edge. So, yeah, glorious day. I mean, tiring. We all thought afterwards, we're going to win the FA Cup. We're going to go mental in town. We're going to go out. We're going to be drinking till 3 a.m. We were all in bed by 11 because you get to the pub afterwards and you're emotionally shattered. Everyone's just in the pub, silent, trying to compute what they'd just seen. It was emotionally draining. But yeah, what a day.
It's really funny you say that, Jim, because I remember Istanbul in 2005 and the same thing. And, we were on the first flight out to Istanbul from Liverpool at 7 a.m. So it was a really early start anyway. And then you get there, you're in the square, it was baking down and heat, you're drinking. And because of the time difference, the game didn't kick off till 10 o'clock at night their time.
Oh, wow.
And then it went to extra time and penalties. So I think we're the first team to start a final on one day and win it on another. And then we had these, because the stadium's so far away in Istanbul, it's way out the city, and so they put these buses on, and so we were back on the bus, and I was sat there next to my sister, and my dad rang, and managed to get some signal, and my dad rang, and he was like, "Hey, you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine," and he was like, "Where are you?" I said, I'm on this bus. And he said, "I thought it'd be a big, huge party." And I said, "Dad, everyone's knackered." Everyone's exhausted.
Exactly.
It was like, you see players on the pitch just on the knees.
Yeah.
That was us that day. And it just, because it takes so much out of you. And then when all the adrenaline goes, you just kind of left with nothing.
It's a bit like, to be honest, John, it's a bit like doing a gig. You feel like doing a great gig, right? And you finish the gig and you're pumping, the adrenaline's pumping. And then you get on the train home or whatever, and you're asleep within 5 minutes because it's all drained out of you. But it's that same kind of, that pumping feeling. I think that's an example that just shows how much you care about your football club. Yeah. If football is making you do that and making you physically drained, it just means that you care every iota of your body about this football club. Obviously you're talking about Champions League final. That's the biggest of the biggest. But whatever club gets you, whether it's Johnson Paint Trophy final or whatever, these fans care enough that it literally has a physical reaction in there. And I think that's beautiful. That's the beauty of sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned gigs there. That leads us on nicely to some live touring you are doing. I'll run for your tour dates, Jim. You are in London on April 23rd, Brighton on April 30th, Manchester on May 3rd, and then a little bit of a break, Chesham on May 23rd, Birmingham June the 7th, and then here in sunny Liverpool on June the 13th. So what should people expect?
Well, football silliness, I think, is how I do it normally. Obviously, I've got a big sort of back catalogue online. I do a lot of sketches. I do a lot of parody songs. I used to do quite a lot of parody songs. So anyone that's followed any of my stuff for a while will know what I'm about. I'm silly, football themed, family friendly, ridiculousness. Basically, kind of like the antidote to all the serious analysis that you get. I am the other end of the spectrum. And so now I'm bringing it to stage, and so it'll be a lot of songs. I'll be opening with the 92 Football Club song, which everyone sort of knows me for, which I love performing. I do a couple other songs in the middle. I'm doing loads of stand-up about, quite a bit about Palace, but other clubs as well. I've got this new bit that I've been working on since last year called Football Heckle Comebacks, where I get people in the crowd to shout out their team, and then I'll do like a roasting sort of heckle comeback line. They've been going down so well, and I love writing them, and they always get a big laugh. So I'll be doing tons of that. I'll be making sure that wherever I go with the show regionally, I've got tons of heckle comebacks for that region. So, Tranmere fans are turning up, and I've got one for them and stuff. So it's loads of fun. It's an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the venue. I think some venues are slightly longer. It's a real, it's an antidote to the sort of the negativity of football, which I do think does follow us around a little bit, especially if you're busy online. So it's very fun, it's family friendly, as I said. And I'm stopping I think the one Liverpool is right before the World Cup, and there's plans possibly to do a couple of dates after the World Cup. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of content from that. And actually, what I'm liking about the show is because of the heckles and stuff, and because of the way football is in terms of, my first show is before the end of the season. Every show is going to be different. So there will be things that will happen that I can work into bits and heckles or whatever. And in fact, the nature of the heckles is all the audience is going to be different anyway. So every show is going to be unique in that regard. So that's quite nice. It won't be the same show twice. It'll be different each night. Which, in a way, why not buy a ticket for every night? And then because it's 7 different shows. I'm really looking forward to it. We've had some great sales already, which is lovely. I've had some lovely messages online from people saying they're excited to come. It's nice to kind of see that I have fans all over the country, which is absolutely lovely. And I have to say, my fans in particular, and I don't know how I've done this, but they seem to be some of the nicest people online. They are, and I try and put out a friendly kind of persona, so hopefully it's reflected that. But they all seem really lovely and just appreciative of just fun football silliness and having a good time. So that is very much the theme of the tour.
Yeah, I think it is what you put out, isn't it? And I think there'll be people like you who, don't mind the serious stuff, but are ready to just laugh a bit at the ridiculousness of football. And I think if they found a place in you to do that, then they'll kind of reflect, who you are. And I guess people find you in all sorts of ways now. There's, social media, you're doing your videos on social. There's the Match of the Daly podcast that I mentioned before. And so people finding you in different ways, which is always nice as well, isn't it?
Really nice, yeah. And to be honest, that's the MO of a comedian these days, isn't it? You're not just getting on stage. You have to be everywhere. You have to be everything to everyone, everywhere, on every platform. So I'm constantly putting out content. But I love making it. I love making stupid videos. I love writing silly jokes. I love being on stage. I love talking to football fans. I love finding out where they're from, who they support. So I know some comedians sort of say doing content's like another job. I just really love doing it. And if I get a video where one person says, "Oh, I love that," or "I laughed at that," that's great. That makes my day. So the fact that we're going to be doing these venues, we're doing Hot Water in Liverpool, iconic venue, 100-seater. I'm doing the Glee in Birmingham, 100-seater. The fact I'm going to be in these iconic venues doing my silly show to a room full of people, I'm so excited. I've been waiting a long time, John. I've been going a long time doing comedy. It's my first tour. I think I've been going for 12 years. So, they don't say Jim Daly flies into things, early doors. He takes his time.
You've had a big pick and a big plan. Yeah. Would encourage everyone to go and see Jim. You've had a good taste of what it's all about. He's got videos on his social media. Best way to find all the tour dates on all his social media, it's probably on his link tree, which is Jim Daly Comedy. Daly is spelled DALY. Jim Daly Comedy. But Jim, it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for pointing out the spelling. It's the Irish spelling, by the way. So thank you for pointing that out, because I get people trying to put I's and E's all over the place. No, it's just 4 letters. It's from Cork. It's the Irish spelling. Learn it.
Well, yeah, that'll go down amongst our listeners as well. Jim, top man.
Cheers, John. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to Jim and to John. John for sorting that out before he was away this week. Want to chat about the league in the round, and then we'll get closer to us with the Nottingham Forest game on the horizon. Pete, Arsenal failing to win at Wolves is 2-0 up. I think, some of that's a little bit Arsenal specific in terms of where they find themselves in this slightly funny moment they are as a club. I always say this thing that managers will fall back on the thing they are. So, for instance, when things aren't going right for Jurgen, he wants to be more intense. That's the first thing he wants. When things aren't going right for Guardiola, he wants to be more controlled. When Arteta comes up against the wall, he wants to be more defensive. Gerard Houllier was very similar as a manager, and you fall back on the thing that you first and foremost are. And I think that's part of what's happening to Arsenal a little bit from time to time. That is Arsenal specific, but it is sort of worth saying that at the minute, it does add to the feeling of it's exceptionally difficult to put games to bed in this league. I'm not going to quite say there are no easy games. Arsenal are 2-0 up on the hour mark, so I'm not going to say there's no easy games, but against bottom of the league. But putting teams to bed does appear to be something that does not happen as much as it used to happen up and down the division.
No, yeah, well, to defend Arteta, which I've definitely not come on the show to do, absolutely. Wolves, just in their position right now, they're playing with freedom. That's what it looks like to me. It's like, I was listening to the interviews before the game, and it's all they want to do is not be the worst Premier League side ever. So a point for them was a win. Obviously a win is a party, isn't it, type of thing. So they've got no realistic aspirations of staying up, and that obviously goes without saying. When you look at the league table, they look very damned. So they've got that freedom in the play, and then on the flip side, Arsenal were playing with pressure. But when we then dig deeper with Arteta and his style as management, that pressure comes from within. And when you're watching Arsenal, and I know it's an ongoing joke that they're going to implode and they finish second for the last few seasons and stuff like that, they seem to be putting the pressure on themselves and how they're approaching game. When you're 2-0 up, do you shut up shop? Do you really, do you know what Wolves are dangerous, or do you go and get that third goal? And I was watching it last night just thinking, I'm just glad he's not our manager, and I really am. I think it's good if you win the league. It's great, and if you win the league, no one's ever complaining about how you played football. But I don't like, you talked about Jurgen Klopp and about intensity. Jurgen Klopp was the representation of what we felt we all was as a city, as Scousers, as this, that, and the other. And Mikel Arteta wouldn't represent me as a football fan. And last night watching that, I think they got what they deserved. And crucially as well, they had the muscle memory of playing them only a few weeks back in the league where it was 2-1 as well. So it's like they knew the mistakes that they nearly slipped up that day, and then they've come to this point. And it's like, we have to win here. We have to put the pressure on City, and they just allowed them back into it. So it's quite funny. But even from a Liverpool perspective, you don't want Arsenal going to win the league because they're a London side, they're a big club. They've got the monkey off the back if they've won the first league title in 20 years or 22 years, whatever it is. Then it puts them as a real powerhouse. Whereas if they don't win the league, it reduces them back to where they was, wasn't it? And where does Arteta go next from that?
I'll come on to that in a minute. I want to talk about this. For me, being able to put sides to the sword, I think it is a challenge. It wasn't happening much last season. It wasn't happening for Liverpool much last season. Liverpool scored 2 goals in the most amount of games anyone's ever done it in, when it's 38 in the league. But they didn't get that many 3s, 4s and 5s. But they got loads and loads of 2s and then shored it up the other end. It seems to me as though at the minute we're in a good place, a better place to be able to see the overall Liverpool view. What we've talked there before, Keifer, about the midfield. It seems like Liverpool are looking to have sheer irresistible quality in the final third, which is something that Arsenal don't have. I've got a lot of respect for those players, but ultimately it does not, at the minute, look to me like he picks a front 3 as squad options, and he doesn't pick a front 3 of, Jesus Christ, this is unbelievable talent in the front 3. There's unbelievable talent elsewhere, but in the front 3, unbelievable talent. It doesn't seem like it's quite there. It looks to me that's what Liverpool have invested in Ekitike, in Isak, in Wirtz. That's Liverpool's angle, Liverpool's arguments. We haven't seen it this season. But that is the challenge, I think. Liverpool have got to find their way to make that irresistible quality that they're going to have in the final third pay next season.
Absolutely. I mean, just to go back to your point then, I was chatting to someone last night and I said the Arsenal front line, it feels very workman-like in the same sense that Liverpool's midfield, there was always that joke of like 17, 18 when it was like Wijnaldum, Henderson, Milner. That's almost feels like Arsenal got their equivalent up top, if that makes sense. You look at Gyökeres and Jesus, and even if you were to throw Havertz into that mix, it's like no one there is convincing. I think there's question marks over all of those options. I think Madueke's been a decent squad option, but ultimately is he a player who should be playing at the top of the Premier League?
Left side's Trossard and Martinelli.
Yeah, and then obviously I think last night he moved Saka into that more number 10 role, maybe trying to get him, similar maybe to what we're talking about with Florian Wirtz, where you're trying to get your best player, your talisman, in those dangerous areas where he can obviously affect games and have an impact. But as I say, I think when it goes to 2-1, and I mean, let's have it right, the goal just comes from absolutely nothing. It's a brilliant strike, and I think when you're in a title race, and I think the pressure is so clearly on Arsenal, they have been so far ahead this season. It's almost been like everyone's kind of publicly conceded that Arsenal are going to win the Premier League. I think when you have that front line, you're not able to kick on. You've not got someone to look at and be like, right, go and get us the goals. You can't look at Gyökeres, even though he's a £75 million striker, and be like, right, go and pick up the ball and do something special. In the same way that Hugo Ekitike and Liverpool were 1-0 down to Newcastle the other week, 2 moments of brilliance. I mean, the other 9 or 10 players on the pitch aren't playing particularly well, but Ekitike gets the ball twice, Liverpool 2-1 up. The game changes on its head. So when you're talking about sheer quality, I think Liverpool have definitely got that. I think their problem next season is harnessing it on a more consistent basis. Getting the ball to those players in dangerous areas, i.e. Florian Wirtz, building those relationships with the wide players, Ekitike, Isak when he comes back. I think in terms of what they have as kind of front six options, they are really stacked, and that's ultimately what it came down to last summer. I think they were probably looking at Salah, that he would maybe be on his way out in the next 1 or 2 years. They've got a lot of people said they shouldn't have signed Isak and Ekitike, but clearly they've looked at that until they're two of the best, probably under 25 forwards in Europe.
I think those are the best. You can get the two best ones, and the thought, well, let's get the two best ones then.
And deal with it after, how it's going to work, how we're going to line them up, how they're going to partner, who's going to be kind of the hierarchy. We'll deal with that after, but let's just get them through the door, because then that is a brilliant problem to have. And, for different reasons this season, there's been games when Ekitike has been brilliant, and you say, how does Isak get back into the team? Then there's been times when Ekitike needs a rest. The game against Sunderland last week, is that maybe one where you want Isak? There's a bit more spacing behind, it's a bit more rough and tumble. So I think Liverpool, in terms of that, as I say, that kind of front line, I think that they're so well stacked. It's kind of almost the workman-like that they need to kind of recalibrate, because I think once you get that, you've got an unbelievable platform to give these talented players who are obviously going to win football matches, but also the biggest football matches as well, because of their quality.
It does. So it goes both ways. This one is the idea of the biggest football matches for the quality, but the other one is, and saying before about 4-2-1-3 in the majority of games, the other thing is that bottom 10 situation, home and away. Whereas I say these games, so many of them are so tight. Some do get away from time to time in quite odd circumstances. You're never surprised if Bournemouth are involved in a game where one team scored 4. But there is a for me, this is the fascinating sort of situation now with where the league finds itself, because there is such strength in what you can sort of call the midfield of the league, that you do wonder that what could crack this for not just one season, but maybe for 2 or 3, is if you can be able to really find your way through to killing games. I think that to me is, I think that's the challenge that Liverpool have set themselves, and you can argue whether or not it's the right challenge, because you've got to win the right to be about killing games, and that's what we've not been anywhere near good enough at this season. But I think that is the challenge that Liverpool as a club have set themselves, and the proof of the pudding in that now will be next season. But last night's a good example as to how hard the challenge is.
Yeah, I remember coming on to do I think it was a pre-Burnley show, the 1-1, just in January there, and I remember having a look at Burnley's fixtures, and don't get me wrong, I don't think, regardless of what points tally Wolves set, I don't think they're anywhere near the worst team they ever play in the Premier League. I don't think Burnley are either, but they are right down there, and they're not going to make much of a fight to stay up. I looked at the fixtures, they'd only been beaten by more than 2 goals once, and I think that was the first day of the season against Spurs. Maybe it's twice now, but this is, again, a team that's not putting up any sort of a fight to stay up, and yet nobody is beating them by any more than 2 goals. Nobody gets to 70 minutes and gets to take a couple of players off and gets to rest them and going forward, and that's ultimately the tail of the league, because whatever points tally these two teams end up on, Arsenal and Man City, is going to be nowhere even close to the points tallies.
Arsenal going at 82-point pace.
Yeah, and we end with 82 last season.
We end with 84, we win it on 82, and then we get 2 draws in the last 4 games. We can get to, when we win it, we can still get to 94. I suspect it's reasonable to say Liverpool could have got to 90, sorry, if they'd have needed to. They could have got to 90 if they'd really needed to get results in those games. But Liverpool will at least go and get 90-point pace at this point last season. Off a tough February, they were still going at 90-point pace. Arsenal right now are going at 82, and they're a disgrace to North London.
Well, that they are, but I think there's a couple of facets to that. Firstly, I don't think this Arsenal team's anywhere near as good as the peak Liverpool teams under Klopp, and I don't think this Man City team's anywhere near as good as the peak Guardiola teams. But also, it's the fact that teams aren't able to put games to bed, and I think that's the issue. And I don't think Arteta's whole demeanour or mentality helps with that in any way, shape or form. And this is quite hypocritical, because we quite literally supported a team for however many years, 9 years was it, Jurgen was there. We saw him running onto the pitch and jumping into Alisson's arms after the derby. So I'm not by any means the celebration police, or I'm not by any means the idea that you can only properly celebrate once you've won a trophy and we can't enjoy these moments. But it did feel like we had that core within the squad who would come out after those big wins. Your Alissons, Van Dijks, Hendersons, that real maturity of, yes, we want to really enjoy this, but we're fully focused on the next game. Whereas with Arsenal, when they win a game last minute, as they have done plenty of times, and that part of that will be down to the mentality that Arteta has instilled in that team. But it's like, it's the absolute end of the world. It is the biggest thing that's ever happened. And what that means is that when you drop points in games like last night, it's all of a sudden the worst thing that's ever happened, and all of a sudden you're 4 games on a bad run, and you've gone from, you know, being possibly being able to extend that lead to 9 points to it now being 2. And look, who are those Alissons, Van Dijks and Hendersons in that Arsenal side? You know, Declan Rice, we all saw the lip reading after the Forest game where he says every effing time or something. When they've dropped points to go 7 points clear at the top of the league, they've extended their lead on City that day, who lose to Man United in the derby at lunchtime. And I'm just like, where's that maturity? It's fine having a jumped up manager who maybe gets a little bit too excitable, but where's that core of the squad and the maturity? And that's why I think ultimately they may crumble here.
Do you think City, does anyone though really think City looks strong enough to put a genuine City? I mean, now theoretically as we sit here, it's in City's hands. If City win every game between now and the end of the season, they win the league. Does anyone think City have got that in them though this season?
I don't think they'll need to.
No, that was going to be.
I think they'll win it.
City?
I think they'll win it, yeah. I think everyone always thinks this, when you look at a team in the season, that they are the same team as they was 2 months ago, and they're always developing. And I think the players that have just come in, and the fact that Guardiola's got so much experience and know-how, and there will be experienced players in that City team, I think they'll just do enough to put enough pressure on.
I don't think they'll need to. Yeah, I think they'll win that game against Arsenal. They'll go a point ahead, and I think, 10 games to go until the end of the season? After that, you know.
No, the game City Arsenal's is in April.
I know it is. But in terms of if it take that game out of it, there's 10 other games for which they have to play. And Arsenal go through a tough run now, and then they finish quite nicely, whereas City's the other way around. But I just think that City will win that game. The difference, as we sort of see it now, will be 1 point. And I don't think City are going to win 9 and draw 1 of their last 10, but I don't think they'll need to. I think 6 wins, 3 draws will be enough for City.
Yeah, the League Cup final will be interesting, because I think if City win that one, it really will it'll just make them suffer inside, don't it? Where that belief system will be definitely gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I dare say I think Guardiola looks hungrier than ever. I think he knows that his time at City is. I think in an ideal world, he'd like to win the league and probably go bow out this season. And I think you just kind of get that. Maybe because is there an element that he took it for granted during those times when they won 4 in a row? I mean, it's only kind of human nature that you would if you won something so many times. But I just kind of get that vibe and that impression from him that he really wants to leave Man City on a high. And just kind of everything he says, it's just like he is absolutely dying. And to get one over on Arteta, or just should I say, not to get one over Arteta, but to stop Arteta getting one over on him, I think would just be like his perfect way of kind of bowing out of Manchester City. So I just think everything he said, everything we're seeing from him, he just looks as hungry as I've seen him in a while.
Okay, I want to talk about us. Nottingham Forest, they're playing tonight in Turkey, Pete. It's got to be good for us, I'm sorry. Yes, the new manager gets to have a game, gets to have a little look at what he's about, what the players are about. Probably won't go all in at the same time. You know, they might try and box a bit clever, because obviously they've got a home game on the horizon. They've got to win, got to look to be getting results in the home games between now and the end of the season. But then they've got that game again the following Thursday, and you just know that ownership group, and I'd argue rightly, will be seeing the Europa League as A, something they can win, and B, as a pathway into the Champions League. So that will be a massive part of that club's focus. I think all of this is good for Liverpool going into Sunday. It has to be.
It's absolutely, yeah. I wasn't aware that they were playing. Arne Slot told me this morning. Not because we're mates, because I watched the press conference. But yeah, no, I was quickly looking at my phone, and I was like, oh yes, the Europa League. But no, it's a good point. He's a Greek owner, isn't he? The Forest owner, and in Europe, they see the Europa League as a big competition. I think that's got to be noted. And it's Fenerbahce away. That's we talked about Galatasarary before. That's got its own problems, especially because Nottingham Forest are obviously not a brilliant football side at the moment. It's got to play into our hands, because I think that has to be priority. I think if you go into a new club as the new manager, and you can navigate yourself through to the next round of the Europa League in your first week, and then get beat, even if you got beat by Liverpool, because Liverpool aren't they? We are still the champions. I think that's a massive box tick. So I think the priority will be that. I think if they get a decent result as well later, even a draw or a narrow defeat, I think that puts the onus again on what their priority should be. If they got battered 4-0, then it's a bit more, they've got to get the result against us. But even that still plays into our hands, because you've just been battered and confidence. So whatever way you look at it, I think Liverpool have got to fancy themselves going into this game. The new manager bounce just doesn't seem like... my famous last words, isn't it? Doesn't seem, we might just get away with the new manager bounce because they're playing. And
there's only so many you can have in a season, a new manager bounce.
Yeah. Because if not, you'd just be constantly bouncing. If you were Forest this year, did you go last year?
I didn't have gone this.
I know you're going this week. Yeah, I went last year, and it was it was bang on. It's worth
I
saying.
went when we got beat Awani.
Yeah, the Awani one. So this one, it was bang on last year. The atmosphere was unbelievable. It reminded me of being at Goodison, and I can't pay a higher compliment. Genuinely, I can't. In terms of, because if they'd have won, they'd have gone above. Not gone above us, but they were chasing us down. They were second, I think, when it kicked off.
The goal, was it?
Yeah, just gets the equaliser.
They scored that early, didn't they?
They scored at the first attack. We actually started quite well for 5 minutes. They go up the other end. Chris Woods, obviously, inevitably slots, and then from there the game sort of, I say peters out. That's not quite right. The first half sort of peters out, and then we're great second half. But the atmosphere was absolutely bang on. It really was. But even then, we still had a bit too much for them. They're less good. I don't think the atmosphere will be the same. It's Sunday 2:00. It's not a midweek game. It's off the back of you're on your fourth manager. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't want to sort of talk it down because it'll still be an intimidating City ground. But again, I think that's to our advantage as well. It's a good kick-off time.
I don't know. I was at the 12:30. And
When newly promoted.
They were, and I accept that as a caveat, but that ground was wild. And I can confirm, having been there, that they do not like us very much.
They do not like us.
They really don't like us.
Might be just you, Andy.
Might be just me.
They do not like us.
So, yeah, I think any away game in the Premier League has away game in the Premier League vibes this season. We all know how the league's gone. I don't know who's going to play up front. Igor Jesus hasn't scored the goals, but he can hold it up. He's really tight and robust. And now when he's...
Good technique.
Yeah. And they've got those players, and they've got those players to hurt us. So I'm not saying by any stretch it should be a walkover for Liverpool, but unfortunately, we haven't been good enough, especially at home to the bottom 6 teams this season, to be able to afford to say, oh, you know what, actually a point at Forest is fine. Well, we know that because of our position in the league here.
Yeah, it's a game that Liverpool really need to win.
We've got a lovely 8 days off here and a lovely 6 days off. Well, not off, obviously they'll be in the training ground, but without a game and a lovely 6 days off following that. And my God, I know we talked about it earlier, but that avoiding that playoff is just an absolute godsend, especially for our squad at the moment. Like you say, they are quite literally going to another continent. I looked it up. Fenerbahce's in Asia, Galatasaray's in Europe, so I've got that right. So it's as nice as it can get. It's 3 days rest for them with all that travel time. I understand they've got the new manager, and to be fair, I do think you can get a bit of a tune out of them for a while. He seems like one of those managers who can really engender a spirit within the squad. We all saw when he was at Wolves going out for pints after they won the games with the team. So he'll do that for a while. I don't think there's any sort of long-term strategy thinking there. And I think if you got Marinakis in a room and said, listen, I'll not go anywhere, but is he going to be here next season? He'd probably say, you know what, maybe not. But we've got to just go there and get the job done. It's not going to be easy, but Liverpool haven't made it easy for themselves this season. It's their own fault.
You said before, sorry, Keifer, about picking your Champions League final team. That's almost what he can do here. He can pick, he's got completely, he can pick whatever team he wants within reason with the players who are fit. So we know there's no Frimpong, but we know that there's Gomez. He's been happy with Szoboszlai or Jones at right back. I think he's actually a bit happier with them than he lets on, in that it sort of does mean that he can get a lot of the players he likes and trusts on the pitch at the same time. But he can pick Gomez for this one. He's being clear about that as well. He can pick between his left backs. He can, he can use the agency he does have. He can use as many points. What sort of sides are you expecting?
Yeah, it feels like for the first time, I feel like the last couple of shows I've done, it's always just been like one change here or there. It feels like Liverpool haven't had the luxury of being able to change too many things. But, Gomez coming back in, I think, is a big one. I think especially you'd put the City ground into one of those games, a bit like Brentford, where you're going to have to win your aerial duels. If you are going to win a game, that's going to be key. Especially if you are talking about, Igor Jesus playing up front. He's a big fella. He's, first balls, second balls, that kind of thing. So I think, if Gomez is fit enough from what it sounds like, I think he comes straight back in. I think the back four then probably do Kerkers. I think that the balance of if you have Gomez is a bit more of a solid option, it maybe gives Kerkers that license to go forward. I think again he's another player you can probably group with Florian Wirtz, is starting to find a bit of a rhythm, bit of a tune. Kind of all that criticism earlier in the season, looks rather silly now. And then in midfield, I think. Obviously, Szoboszlai's in there. It's not going to be Jones, is it? I don't think. I think he's obviously, as I said, made that clear that he's not in his strongest team. So it's Gravenberch, McAllister.
You see, you haven't done yourself now.
No, I was just thinking. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
If he picks Gomez at right back, he can, unless he chooses Wirtz off a flank.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Does he swap Gakpo then? But then I've said everything I've just said about playing Wirtz as a 10. So go on, I'll do Gravenberch and Szoboszlai. Then you do Salah, Wirtz, Gakpo. Yeah,
I could see Keifer.
gets the key up front.
And it gives you a move if you do that as well, because, you know, if you go Szoboszlai, Gravenberch in the midfield, if you go McAllister, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai right back, and you want to make a change, well, the change might be putting Joe Gomez on it right back, which you don't want to do at 0-0 and 60. If he starts with Gomez and it is 0-0 and 60, you get to do, you know, a few more attacking players on the pitch. So I think that makes most sense.
Szoboszlai right back, I think he goes. I think he's proven this season that in the biggest of games, when your fullback's missed, I think he always goes Szoboszlai. I think he does that because he brings him into midfield as well as the inverted fullback. So I think that's what he'll do. I think he'll want to grow in a performance. I think he'll want to negate their threat, their attack and their counter attack. And I think Szoboszlai will do that. And I think if he does that, he'll keep Kirk as left back. If he brought Gomez in, you never know, you might see Robertson as well, but I just think personally he'll play Szoboszlai right back and then keep the midfield the way it was.
Okay, excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed to Jim and John, but also here. Been an excellent show. So you can have a relaxed week and enjoy it. Keifer, Pete and Andy, Paddy and Andy behind the cameras as well. See you later on.